Glued to her computer screen, her eyes light brown, saw it, college applications due now. Her heart raced as she pressed send. She was just nervous. She knew she would attend. But she wasn't nervous about her grades to maintain. It was her friends. Would she see them again? She called them up and said, "Let's get lit. Let's have one last outing before we split." She was content by what happened. It'll be fun to be haunted, she imagined. Plus, she hasn't been out in a while. Hopefully this trip will free her lifestyle. She thought of a story to win the game. Her eyes flickered. The ideas flooded her brain. She thought of tales so goreful, so scary, so chilling, so alarming, so Bloody Mary. It's anger that always controls the emotions, so don't let it in, your inner implosion. Anger will definitely get the better of her, the horrific and sinful wedding massacre. It was her wedding day, Miss Annabel Gray. Her new last name, Miss Cabriolet. She was so in love with her husband-to-be, she had it all planned out and only 23. She wanted to be pulled by a horse-drawn carriage, if only there wasn't a dissolution of marriage. And the one lover of hers she thought so true had just a few other lovers, more than 22. But Miss Annabel Gray had no clue of the cheating or the anger that was going to break through. As soon as her beloved Mr. Cabriolet told her his sins on their wedding day, and so he did as they were standing by the priest, after she said her vows, last and very least. He opened his mouth to say his part, but all that came out was, "Look, sweetheart." He didn't finish that dreadful sentence because what came out next was extremely tremendous. The liquid had splattered everywhere, on her dress, on her teeth, and in her hair. For Miss Annabel didn't understand that a knife was in her bloody red hands. How it got there is a mystery. All that's known is that adultery caused this mess to happen in the first place, but at least the mister did it face to face. Now back to the livid Annabel Gray, whose guests were running out the doorway. They didn't get quite that far before Miss Gray hit them with her car. There was blood all over the street, where Annabel smashed heads on the concrete and slashed the guts out of anyone who passed, all because her anger was unsurpassed. She still didn't know that he cheated on her. She was mad he didn't respond. That saboteur. Miss Annabel Gray kept running and running, running from the people that wouldn't stop coming. She ran her hardest as they chased her. She still couldn't understand. It was all a blur. She turned and looked back with eyes wide. It was a wedding massacre, and she was the bride. All her anger she held inside tight. It itched and itched her like a mosquito bite. She suddenly stopped and turned around, only ghostly figures that did surround her, weeping and weeping about what went wrong. It was obvious that she couldn't stay strong. The dead groom asked, "What have you done? You have gone and killed everyone." She looked down and saw the mess she made, because her anger consumed her and betrayed her mind, her soul, and her petty worth. It took her and made her hell on earth. So next time anger rises within, it would be a wrongdoing to give in to the sins you would definitely commit. Don't let it consume you. Follow the Holy Writ.
She speaks of tales so scary and great, horrific in settings that occur late. Tales of monsters and secrets galore, occasionally filled with gooey gore. She speaks with strength, using her military ways, talking during the darkest days. Gloom and doom is her forte. When she's not on the field, she tells tales against her friends before they go to their different ends. She wants to prove that she's the best. Her two best friends are going their separate ways. She wants them to remember her as the strong girl in these last days. Her story would be the best of the best, the one that would stand out among the rest. This was her break from being a young, strong warrior, to tell a story of terrible horror. In the dark she'll speak and all will listen. The wolves will howl in the great distance. Once she begins to speak, the whole world stops. Staring into her big green eyes, her words will carry on for miles. Now listen to this tale. It won't end in smiles. Once there was a man named Edgar. He was walking alone in the dead of the night. There was almost no light. Edgar stopped walking when he saw something horrific. There was a scary monster on the other side of the field. The Knight of America, Edgar, carried a shield. He stared at the monster with his massive hands. He was ready to cross the foreign lands. The monster growled, its body so tall. Edgar was nervous for this big brawl. He wasn't ready to go to war. He thought he was. This is one of his terrible flaws. The monster's teeth were huge, as big as could be, and his tail was long as far as the eye could see. Edgar stood his ground, but he was afraid. What if this battle led him to his grave? The monster came closer and closer. The big monster swung his arms. Edgar screamed in alarm. Edgar had fear in his eyes. The monster could sense it. He could predict Edgar's demise. Edgar fought back as best as he could, as the monster grabbed him and pulled him into the woods. It was dark and scary. The trees had sad faces. It was one of the most scariest places. The monster was cackling with glee. Edgar couldn't help but cry as he was being dragged by his knee. In the middle of the woods, the monster stopped. He knew this was the best spot. He grabbed Edgar's arms and whispered in his ear, "Tick-tock goes the clock, it's dinner time!" Edgar screamed in pain as the monster began to eat him, tearing him apart limb by limb. When the monster was done, Edgar was completely gone. The monster licked his lips, proud of his work. He began to lurk. Edgar was forgotten in the scary woods that night. The monster had beaten him due to Edgar's terrible fright. Wolves began to howl as this story comes to a close. Be careful, children, when you walk in the dark alone.
Prepare yourself for the story that will make all your stories fold, for this is the most horrific story ever told. By the biggest fool of them all, even though he thinks he's wise, but not listening and turning down knowledge, that's his vice. For after high school his search for knowledge would end, and his greed in the search for money would begin. Though his peers pleaded him to go to college, he said no. He said his rhyming talent was better than any knowledge. But now, back to the most horrific story said. The winner of this challenge has already been set. There once was a young, greedy, and foolish fellow, with semi-good character and a temper that was mellow. But his greed for money drove him mad, and rash decisions his poor fool always had. This lad was on the search for hidden treasure in the woods, or so the story said, that the woods held a treasure with golden goods. But these woods weren't just any woods, they were haunted, and the treasure by the killer ghost, it was guarded. All his friends and family warned him and pleaded with him not to go, for they cared about his life and knew his life would end so. But he paid no attention to their warnings, oh poor fool. All he wanted was the gold, for the thought of riches made him drool. So on one rather calm and early yet creepy morning, he set out to the woods despite all warning. When he reached the woods he felt uneasy, for out of nowhere the weather turned freezing. He felt a chill run up his spine, but he continued in thinking he'd be fine. What he didn't know was that by the ghost he had been seen, and know his end was nearer than it seemed. 20 minutes had passed and he kept on walking. He knew he was lost now and he worried, but all he wanted was to win. The pile of gold that was to be found, he did not see the stalking killer ghost. They got closer to him with every step. The poor fool was nearing death. The light outside was quickly getting dark and his flashlight wouldn't spark. The poor fool now, all taken over by fear, for he knew that his end was surely near. He regretted not listening to the warnings. He knew he was a fool because all he thought about the treasure he'd be scoring. But now it was too late for regretting, for the ghost came out and he wasn't letting the poor fool leave this place with his life. The bloodthirsty ghost was ready to kill the poor fool with his knife. The ghost slashed the knife and came down upon his heart. The poor fool was now dying, and as his blood spilled onto the earth, he knew his choices weren't for the best. But it's too late now, for he was dead.
Shit. What do I do?
Grab him!
How do I do?
Am I supposed to fall? Alright, yeah.
It's an airplane.
Wait, what?
Eat him.
Oh. Wait,
Yeah. No, record that. Redo this.
Glued to her computer screen, her eye. I'm so tired of reading this.